I know Europe loves a good lecture, whether it's on secularism or free speech or racism, so I've got a candidate for them. A new report, it talks about rising Islamophobia in a few countries. Muslim kids are getting bullied in schools. Muslims cannot find jobs. They can't even rent good homes. It is the perfect candidate for lecturing. Just one problem though. You have to speak to the mirror this time because all of this is happening in Europe. That's right. This report surveyed nearly 10,000 Muslims in 13 European Union states. And here's what it found. A worrying surge in racism against Muslims and dehumanizing anti-Muslim rhetoric. This was before October last year. So before the Hamas attack on Israel, we've seen Islamophobia only rise after that. So chances are the numbers now will be worse. Nonetheless, let's take a look at them. 47% Muslim respondents reported racism. It is up from 39% in 2016. The numbers differ from country to country. In Austria, it was 71%. In Germany, it was 68%. These are very high numbers in so-called liberal countries. 39% Muslims reported discrimination in the job market. 35% Muslims face difficulties in renting or buying houses, which is up from 22% in 2016. Again, very high numbers. The report says Muslims are more likely to live in poverty, more likely to live in overcrowded housing, and more likely to be on temporary job contracts, meaning no job security. Like I said, these numbers will likely be higher now. Just look at Germany. They logged nearly 2,000 anti-Muslim incidents this year, 2,000. It's a 114% rise from 2023. What is driving this surge of Islamophobia? Well, Europe is more diverse now. The last decade saw an influx of Muslims into the continent. Reports say around 3.5 million of them. As a result, Europe has more Muslims today than ever before. They make up around 5% of the total population, which is around 26 million. And cue the Islamophobia. Europe championed secularism when their society was homogeneous, or mostly Christian. The moment it became diverse, their true face was revealed. They're treating Muslims like second-class citizens, yet no one talks about it. Certainly not the sanctimonious European leaders. They love reminding other countries of secularism. We've seen it many times with India. Just think back to 2020. India had passed a new citizenship law, what we call the CAA, the Citizenship Amendment Act. An entirely domestic matter. But for some reason, the European Parliament waded into it. They said it targeted Indian Muslims. Later that year, we saw another example. This happened after the Delhi riots. Look at what the EU's human rights official said. It is with great concern that I have been observing the rule of law deteriorate in India. She also called for an independent probe. Again, as if it's Europe's call to make. Another example is from 2018. The European Parliament talked about so-called anti-conversion law in India. They said it threatened religious minorities. Some European MPs have gone a step ahead. They've called for sanctions on India. Will these MPs also call for sanctions on Austria, on Germany, or Hungary? Something tells me they won't. Because Europe has created this narrative around them. Any instance of Islamophobia is dubbed as far right or a fringe campaign. But here's what Europe does not tell you. The far right is mainstream now. 7 EU countries are run by far right parties. Does that sound fringe to you? Also, the EU is copying far-right policies in Brussels. Consider the Italian migrant deal. Their government is asking Albania to detain and process migrants heading to Italy, a bit like the UK's Rwanda scheme. A Roman court blocked that deal on Friday. They said migrants cannot be sent to such unsafe countries, but the EU is silently backing it. Some reports say they're considering a similar deal for the entire bloc. So my point is quite simple. This racism and Islamophobia is not fringe. It is very much mainstream in Europe. And it's not recent either. Religious minorities have historically faced racism in Europe, whether it was the Jews in the last century or Muslims in this century. So maybe it's time to stop the lectures, to look inward and fix your own problems.
Firstpost decodes the U.S. election. Explains how America chooses its president. Your primer on the race to the White House. Everything you need to know about how America votes and its global implications. U.S. Election Explained. Every Monday and Thursday only on Firstpost.